All right, so over the weekend, I don't know how many people saw, but there was a bunch of tweets going back and forth between pretty much Dax versus Vercel is what it looked like, whereas AJ from Datadog was just providing numbers and everybody else was providing an insightful amount of misinformation. So I thought I would have you come on and maybe clarify first what happened this weekend, how did it all get started, where was the actual contention, and what is like the reality behind all of this?
Yeah. So should we start from like the beginning for context?
When Adam met Eve, let's go.
All right. So I'm just gonna paste links in Twitch chat.
Yeah.
So this was like a week ago.
Okay, I saw this blog post, right?
Yep. And so they said Vercel functions are now faster, powered by Rust. Honestly, there's nothing wrong with this blog post. They just talked about how they made some improvements. I do think that the average person reading this would probably find it pretty confusing. But like, there's nothing wrong here. Like, they just shared what they did, and this is what you do as a company.
Yeah, it even says right here, when streaming, functions connect to the nearest Vercel edge network region from your function, now powered by Rust. This process was 47% faster, 21 milliseconds to 11 milliseconds on average, and 77% faster, 120 milliseconds to 27 milliseconds for the P99 for time to connect. So it's like giving you internal stats referencing itself. We were this fast, we are now this fast in the P99.
Yeah, and it's a little confusing because when you express things as percentages, they basically, so you were saying earlier, when you add stuff like effect to your Lambda function, it gets slower. Whatever code the user's bringing, they don't control. So they like reduce that to 0, and they just compared their stuff. So these are like, 47% faster. In the real world, though, the user might add in like a second of latency, and it's, not really 47% faster. It's like, like 5 or 6% faster.
10 milliseconds win isn't going to win if you have a full second stop to load your stuff.
Yeah. So I had a feeling that people were going to misinterpret this because when they hear Rust, they hear Lambda, they assume that it's like a new JavaScript runtime or something. So I posted, let me put in the Twitch chat. I posted this, and I was betting that people were going to misinterpret it as a JavaScript runtime and ask for Vercel to open source it. Like almost immediately, that's exactly what people were saying.
Massively. I saw it so many times. People are like, you're going to open source this new engine or whatever. Then people are like, I spy LLR or whatever Amazon's Rust-based engine is or something like that. It was very funny. You called this on the dot.
Yeah. So, and the reason is like the way a Lambda function boots up, there's like a whole life cycle of things that happen. And obviously, like, unless you're one of the few people that needs to go look into that stuff, you just don't know. And like, you don't need to care. Like that stuff is kind of out of your control. So this involves entirely optimizations on that level, which again, most people aren't familiar with. So someone asked me to clarify. So I posted this, which was my understanding of their post.
Okay, so when you use AWS Lambda directly, it boots and executes your code directly. In middleman platforms, they have code that needs to run before to execute their platform-specific feature. This adds overhead you'd normally not have. They've improved the overhead. In other words, what you're trying to say is that Lambda if you're using, I would assume, some sort of node environment, it starts a node process with your entry point, and it just runs.
Yep.
And theirs starts more than just a node process and runs. It starts Vercel stuff and then runs, assuming that Vercel functions and AWS Lambda are 1-for-1 as far as speed goes. So if you can just pretend that they are identical in speed, then the added Vercelisms will necessarily slow down some level.
Yep, exactly. And to be fair, when you use Lambda directly, there is also some stuff that technically runs before that you can override. But it's like such little stuff. There's like not much juice to squeeze. It's like optimizing that. AWS is already massively incentivized to make that as fast as possible. Okay, so this was fine. Everything was.
And this seems like very reasonable tweets. So I'm not sure exactly how this got explodiated. Because I know there's one thread or two threads that just turn into a massive, just so many people talking.
Yes. So this was then kind of where it shifted a little bit. Theo says, Vercel continues to request to fix Lambda. Ryan asks to clarify, isn't this just speeding up the wrapper, not like Lambda itself? And if you click into Ryan's tweet, there's some back and forth. So Theo says something, then Tom, who works on this stuff, and Tom used to like work on his own like serverless runtime stuff, and Vercel acquired his company, and he's been working on this stuff. So he mentions we basically got rid of almost all JavaScript, including the ones that you don't see. We're now as fast or faster than a classic Lambda. And I was like, okay, I get getting close to as fast, but I don't get how as faster starts to come into play.
Yep.
So I was asking him, can you explain what scenario could be faster? And his reply here, I found extremely confusing. He said any scenario where you run the code on Vercel functions versus native AWS Lambda, particularly streaming. So basically in all scenarios, you probably know that cold starts from AWS before the init phase are very variable, which is why I wrote as fast or faster. So my interpretation of this is there's stuff you can control. So what you put into the Lambda function, you can control everything that happens, but there's stuff that happens before. The Lambda service needs to warm up a container, copy bytes into the container. It's stuff that you don't control. It's what AWS does. And there's some variability in that. It's the pure random part about the whole process.
Yeah.
My understanding is what he's saying is when it's randomly faster for Vercel as compared to when it's randomly slower for you using it directly, then it's faster. And I was like, okay, but nobody controls that, and I couldn't really figure out how to articulate it, so I just replied with a face palm, and I like moved on.
I wouldn't interpret this one right here. We basically got rid of almost all the JavaScript, including the ones you don't see. We're now fast or faster than classic Lambda. I wouldn't interpret this as the stochastic cold start that happens to be slower than the normal cold start. We are now fast then. I guess I would also interpret that where it's just like we are now officially as fast or faster.
Yeah. So if you click into Tom's reply, AJ has a reply. So for context, so us at SST, we spend all our time helping companies build stuff on AWS. We work with thousands of companies to do this. We get a lot of exposure to inner workings of AWS. When I have a question about something, when I'm confused about something, despite that experience, I go to AJ to ask him. So AJ is a AWS serverless hero. He's been doing stuff in the serverless AWS space for a very long time. He has given some fantastic talks. He has given some crazy, like, insightful blog posts. He like digs into like every single step, all the way down from the hardware to the software layer to everything else, to really understand exactly what happens. And we're always like up his butt trying to figure out like, should we be doing this? Should we be doing that? He's like the number one expert on this stuff.
I too go up the butt to figure out what I need to do.
It's a great place to find information.
That's where everyone's hiding all their information.
So he asked for some clarification, and he suggests like, I don't know if you guys are measuring this right. Like, here's the right way to do it. So he gave a talk at reInvent last year about. So he put in like hundreds of hours into properly benchmarking the true cold start time of AWS Lambda, because you can't just go off of the metric that's reported because it doesn't contain all of it. Yeah. He has this whole system for testing this type of thing. So he posts this and nobody replies. So he's like, okay, let me just go benchmark it myself. Me and him are talking in the DMs at this point, and we're like, we know how Lambda works. Like, we know that there's not really a way to make it go faster. There's like a small gap of like, maybe there's just one little thing they could have done. But again, just like that thing would have shaved off like 1 or 2 milliseconds. Like, I just don't know if whatever.
Yeah.
So he decides to go. So he streams on the weekends. Last week, he was starting to look into it. So he starts to go benchmarking. And because AJ is so freaking thorough, he did something that nobody ever does, which is he went and read the terms of service of Vercel.
That would be most certainly. You're deep in the weeds if you're reading the terms of services.
Yeah. So he saw that in their terms of services that it said that you're not allowed to perform benchmark tests, which I found funny. So I retweeted it. I'm always going to retweet anything that's like this. But my actual perception of this was companies just have generic legal boilerplate that gets added in that they don't think too hard about. So I don't think they're like explicitly being like, no one better benchmark our stuff. We got to keep it secret. I just think it was like an oversight. And understandably, they replied being like, we'll get this fixed. I think Guillermo's in there in the replies. I love good faith, open source, reproducible benchmarking.
Yep, there it is. We'll get this fixed. Okay, good. Okay.
So they told AJ, go ahead, do your thing.
Solid reply right there. Solid reply.
Yeah. So the thing with this type of test is because it's cold start and AJ can't control Vercel's infrastructure, he's got to actually wait for the function to cold start. So he set up some kind of process that like would monitor it over the course of a week to like, trigger the function during when it was presumably cold and measure. So he left that running. He was in contact with the Vercel team like the whole time. They were like telling him, ways that they wanted him to do it. So they had a whole back and forth, and he was like, AJ does everything by the book. He's not like me.
Yeah, that's good.
So he does that, and then the results were exactly as expected. They are slower than Lambda because it's just a Lambda function under the hood plus some additional booting. He posted his results.
You want to share them? Here, I bet you I could just find the results, right? Because I remember seeing them. Yeah, there they are, right there.
And the part of me that finds it frustrating is, if this is the first time this type of thing happened, it's fine. But this happens a lot where this company will kind of say something vague or unclear, and then someone else will have to spend a bunch of time like clarifying it. They could have just told us that, yeah, obviously it can't be faster. Here's what we did. Like, there's no need to run this benchmark. We know it can't be faster.
Yeah, they can definitely say we don't know how much it's slower, but we do know that there's no universe that exists where starting up a node process versus starting up a node process plus our stuff is going to be faster at the end of the day.
Yep, exactly. Because again, if you understand how Lambda works, you like know that there's only certain levers you have to pull. So I saw that and I was like, of course. But then I tweeted, I've been listening to Kendrick all week, so I was very, very hyped up.
Is that
this is like 70% of why it's happened. Spotify just put me on this crazy playlist where it's just like diss track after diss track, like everything just super hyped up.
You come in with the womp 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 womp. It ain't fast enough. Then dude, again, double womp somebody. Double womping is pretty inappropriate. Like single womp I can understand, but double womping, that's way too much. Way too much Spotify for you, my friend.
No, I took it too far, and I gotta listen to some lo-fi or something for the rest of this week.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So I posted that.
Can we do a quick pause right here? Quick pause for those that don't know the inside story about this. During this time, Dax was texting the Terminal Coffee group going, I should be doing work right now, but I can't because of Twitter. So at this point, you're going on a full Twitter assault.
I literally sat down to do work, and I didn't work for 2 hours. I was at my computer, just not working for 2 hours.
Just womping people.
Yeah. So if you look in the reply, this doesn't matter. Like, here's a reality. So our own workload, our personal workload that we run on Lambda, 0.3% of the total requests that it handles are cold starts. And of those 0.3, almost all of them finish in under 800 milliseconds or something like that. So I agree that this doesn't 100% not matter, but it's just not an area that's this crazy amount of focus, right? Any system getting a reasonable amount of traffic, you have any amount of users, cold starts start to go down your list on things you care about. You care a lot more about okay, how is it performing once it's up? So I'm this stuff doesn't really matter. Okay, they're a little bit slower, fine, but cold starts are still a tiny percentage of your overall system. I just found it annoying that they didn't just tell us, and they kind of did this whole charade of doing a benchmark. And I linked my original tweet being it's just this. And I was already kind of annoyed. And then Tom kind of replied in here with
I have it right now. It's on the screen.
Yeah, this benchmark's not fair. And they were asking asking AJ to do a bunch of other things. I don't want to give the details.
For example, the current Lambda doesn't start an HTTP server and doesn't go through the public internet. But I mean, why would a Lambda start an HTTP server? That is already handled by AWS routing, right? You've already
said, it's a little complicated. It's because there's I'm trying to think the simplest way to do this. If you are building something that is a deep customization on top of Lambda, it can make sense to start an HTTP server to handle the request directly. There's this whole extension system in Lambda 2 that's all based off of HTTP. It's just stuff that that's technically how their stuff works, but it's not how you would deploy your stuff because you have no need to do what they're doing. And the second part of it doesn't go through the public internet. They kept really harping on this one too, being oh, you shouldn't invoke the function from a consistent place. You should invoke it from your laptop. But if we're testing cold starts, that's not relevant. The end-to-end latency is not relevant. If the initial claim was about cold starts, like where you're calling it from just adds noise.
Well, it's not. It's not that it adds noise. It's actually a confounding factor because you can get different routes depending on where you're going, and so you have to control like your actual like you have to actually you have to track all of your interchanges you go through. And if you're using your public, internet, if you're just using your laptop, one thing that you most certainly have to do is every request that you're testing against has to have a mirrored exact same time request also to the other service. So you actually have to be hitting them at the identical times from your laptop. There's all these things that you're going to have to do. You're going to add in so much variability doing that. You really, truly do have to have some service that's not going to be changing much. Like you just want to minimize all possible interneting as much as possible because that is a wild claim to make because you really can't control a lot of this stuff. Like I can't tell you the amount of bugs I had at Netflix that if you made a request at 7 p.m. at night, rows would start missing on your Netflix home row. That's because you're going from US West 1 to US East 1 due to like internet usage in the West versus the East. And it's just like, okay, this is crazy. Like even trying to understand like the complexity of the internet is just wild.
Yeah. Yeah, and AJ talks a lot about that in his talk, which is why in his benchmarks he invokes all these from another Lambda function in the same region. So that's like minimizing it as much as possible. Mm-hmm. So he said that, and I was like, at this point, I was like, we spent a week in good faith, like doing this whole thing, and I was like, it's kind of crazy to say this benchmark's not fair. If you want to test end to end, like what your service offers end to end, fine, but that's like a completely different test. And there's some back and forth. Malte stepped in as the CTO of Vercel, asked me to please reference the original claim, which I read as, I bet you can't produce the original claim. So I linked it.
Yes, which was dangerous of him because you did.
And if you go look into that replies on that thread, it is just some like really weird shit, in my opinion. Right. So he starts to say like, this is some just like weird corporate drivel that just not relevant to anything.
Oh, this right here. It is weird. You shouldn't do this. Get the reference and then just swerve topics. You should be like, okay, yeah, you're right. That was misworded. We should have worded it like this, and then it would have been easy. Like we could have all left, and been happy about it.
Yeah, and that's what I said. I was like, I ignored that, and I just said, you can just say, someone. It's my read, and I think this is maybe AJ's initial read, and I think I agree with it. I think they just got excited. I think one employee got excited and kind of like overstated something. Totally reasonable. Happens sometimes. You're hundreds of people in your company. You can't control exactly what everyone's saying.
Yeah,
that's fine. I just don't get why like then you let that go on for a week and have someone like spend their time benchmarking it. So there's a bunch of back and forth here. I don't know if it's worth getting into. I don't think it was received well. Like I stopped engaging with this, and a bunch of other people
Yeah, I saw it get kind of off the rails towards the end. I mean, Melky has a good one. I mean, Melky is a guy that all he does is AWS, and he can't understand the difference. He's like, no, this actually does make sense. That's a very benevolent way to read a tweet. It is rather intense. Like, what confuses me is just not taking the L and just saying, oops. I don't understand that. Like, what is the harm in saying my bad? Mr. SST, have you ever had to eat a little bit of crow? Have you ever been wrong on the internet?
I've always been right every single time.
Okay.
So it's for me.
So you wouldn't know.
No, I wouldn't know. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I think it's like you can just be straightforward and like people move on and they don't care. And it's actually not that big of a deal. If I had to like theorize a little bit, if I had to like put on a conspiracy hat, they have a big conference coming up not a conference, like an event coming up in 2 weeks.
In New York or something like that, right?
I agree. It's really weird to harp on this when it's like not a big deal. I suspect maybe there's some kind of tie-in to that. They're going to talk about this in some way and this like throw a wrench in some kind of plan. That's again, completely made up. No basis for that, but that's the only like thing I could find to explain it.
Did you see Adam's response? I mean, I'm sure you have. You saw Adam's response to this whole thing. Can you clarify this one? Vercel should limit who can tweet on behalf of the company. Do you know where this came from? I tried to go and find this.
So I try to stay close to the technical stuff so far. There was like a bunch of other just stuff that happened also.
Yeah.
There was a thread of Vercel employees just kind of like really upset at the whole situation, subtweeting me saying like people just hate posting to like get likes, the usual type of thing. They're like, they're bad actors. They're acting in bad faith. The reason JavaScript discourse is like degraded is because they're just talking about me.
Yeah. I mean, you are the reason why it has degraded. I hate to tell you
this. Yeah, it's 100%. I'm that influential. One person is that influential against
It's
this,
amazing.
giant company.
Honestly, you should start a coffee company. With that much influence, you should start a coffee company.
Yeah, I'm pivoting to coffee because I'm tired of this stuff. So here, this is what Adam posted originally. And I think a bunch of people replied being like, oh, just make it so Vercel people can't be on Twitter or something.
Okay, yeah. Which is, I mean, I think Adam always has a very kind of, he has very vegan takes. They're very level. They're very nice takes. I've never seen Adam really say something that's like frustrating or mean or anything like that. He's generally had really nice, responses to everything. And so it is shocking that people like the solution isn't that Vercel should try to control what people say. Vercel should just take more of the helm of trying to control the narrative to saying, hey, this is what it is. I feel like if they were just a touch more proactive, a lot of this stuff wouldn't happen. Because this is like definitely not the first, second, or third time it's happened on the internet this year.
Yeah, and I think that's the tough part for me is if this is the first time this happened, the way I'm reacting is definitely massively overblown. But this comes after like years of just cleaning up after like the whole like a year ago they were just pushing edge compute on everyone. And I just spent and when they do stuff like that, when they come into space and blast an idea like this, other people in the space get asked questions constantly. Should I be doing this? Like, what about this? Like, how come you don't support this? And you have to clean up that marketing.
Well, one of the biggest sins, I got to interrupt. One of the biggest sins of that whole thing was that Vercel said either you can use Edge or Node.js. And it's just like, yo, dog, Edge and Node, like those are two orthogonal concepts. You can be both Edge and running a Node.js process. Like that doesn't, like, where is this coming from? Edge just, everyone is on the edge because at some point it's the barrier between you and the customer. Like everything's the edge if you really think about it. It's just how close can you make that edge? It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, so it's just like over and over the. That's why at this point I have like zero patience with this stuff. When I see, I just immediately go to being frustrated. And yeah, like people like look at that in isolation. Maybe they don't know the history, and they're like, "Oh, this is like no reaction. Or like, why are you blowing this up?" But it's funny. I was thinking so. Back before Remix, the Remix team got acquired, and they were on Twitter a lot.
Yeah,
I would see them be really frustrated, and I understood. Understood. Okay. I get their position and it is frustrating, but I also passed like a level of judgment being like, well, they should, not be like that. Now that I'm more in that situation, I'm like, okay, I get it now. I get what it feels like when you're just dealing with this every single day. But I definitely have like more respect for that whole thing.
Yeah. I have seen, I've seen a lot of Ryan Florence being quite spicy in his replies. Like even when something's like a positive reply, he then responds back with like, yeah, it would have been great if you would have collaborated, huh? And it's just like, damn, Ryan.
Yeah. It's funny because he had a funny post. Let me see. I think he replied to one of Adam's.
He's definitely he's on a new tear because he used to be a much different. It seemed like he was just frustrated before. Now it just seems like he's just leaned into the memeing on, and now it's just like great.
Yeah. But he still struggles, so you can tell. Like, look at this one.
Me this week. I know. I saw this one with Vercel should be doing this, and he was like, "Oh, I can't handle it. I can't." I liked it. I like that one because I have just seen the general frustration it has been with the RSC things because it seems like they're already so much of the research has been spiked out. It is kind of wild that there's no collaboration between the two. It seems like such an easy win.
Yeah, it's just like, and at the end of the day, like I don't mind that they're a company and they have their priorities and they like need to do things that align with the customer base they're trying to target. But what I don't like is when they speak more broadly. Like another thing that happened this week was someone was running into like yet another Next.js like weird quirk that happens.
Yeah, I saw that. Web dev Cody.
Yeah, where he's just trying to run it on a VPS, on a $5 VPS, as they say, and he was getting like a Cloudflare error. And that's really weird. Like, why would you get a Cloudflare error when you're not even touching that stuff? And it's because this product, this framework, Next.js, is really built around the idea of deploying to a very specific infrastructure. And it works really well there. And when you're someone working on this stuff, you design for that infrastructure, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Go ahead, do that all day. So our role is we try to get that to work elsewhere because that's what our users ask. They come, they're like, I'm trying to run Next.js in AWS. Can you help me? And we try to help them. And that's fine. Like Vercel doesn't need to do that. Like we can do that role. But the frustrating part is whenever we talk about these challenges, Vercel will come out and say, no, it's really easy to run everywhere. That's like you're lying when you say that. Like you can run it no matter wherever you want. Like it's not optimized for our stuff. But then you see stuff like that, and like there's hundreds of little things like that we just see every single day. So again, we're stuck cleaning up a mess because people come to use it expecting it to all work, and then it doesn't, and they ask us why it doesn't work. That whole thing.
Are you the one? Are you helping out on what is it, OpenJS or whatever, like the
OpenNext is our project, yeah.
OpenNext, there you go, yeah. Which is really, I mean, you have a lot of experience with the actual differences between when someone says it's really easy to self-host versus what it actually takes to self-host.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like entirely community run at this point. And like there's a bunch of volunteers that with every like patch release that comes out, they do testing, they built a bunch of automated tests, things break constantly, they like find little ways to work around it. It's a big, heavy effort. And the reason we started it is because there were like 5 disparate efforts trying to do this across the different companies and individuals. The guy went together to focus in one place. And it's been pretty successful, but it's a lot of work. So I find it very annoying when Vercel says, oh, it's easy like that. There's not a big deal, because it minimizes the amount of effort that it takes. And these are like Next.js fans. I'm not a Next.js fan. These are people that love Next.js so much, they're trying to use it wherever their company makes them deploy stuff. Yeah,
they love it enough to actually put blood, sweat, and tears into making something work with every single release, which is a lot of effort. So the real question is OpenNext faster than Lambda? Yes or no?
Oh yeah, it's 2 or 3 times faster according to benchmarks that we did, but we won't release.
What, are you scared?
No, it runs about as fast as Lambda, as most things that run on Lambda do. So.
All right. Well, hey, thanks for coming on here and clarifying, because honestly, I could not figure out where, like, I could not understand that path. It was really the AJ part that I think I was missing, with this little in between and the inability to actually, the inability to do the performance testing, then doing the performance testing, then all the offline talking and all that went into actually creating a proper Lambda. And then after doing all of that, still being told it's not apples to apples, when it sounds like it's as apples to apples that is normalistically possible, right? Like it'd be if you were testing 2 different kind of ways to do something, you just try to test the in common features as much as possible to prove which one's actually faster. You don't hinder the different version just to prove that it's as slow. You're like, I know, that's the point of the different version, is so that it's not as slow. This is the entirety of the test.
Yeah. And I think AJ's in chat right now if you want to shout him out.
We just got done. I actually don't think I'm allowed to shout him out again for another 30 minutes, but we already shouted him out.
Well, you guys should all follow him. He's, I guess, like I said, as far as I know, the most knowledgeable in the world on these like deep details that not many people dig into.
Okay, one last thing. Adam was dying that you did not promote your podcast beforehand. Can you please promote your podcast?
No, I'm kind of embarrassed about our podcast because Adam's on it.
Too much vegan energy?
Yeah. Okay, Adam. What is our podcast? Tomorrow.fm. Give it a listen. We talk about this kind of stuff and also other stuff. We actually don't even talk about tech that much anymore. But
you don't even invite me on.
You're welcome to come on. Okay, do you know how hard it is to pin you down? You're like just the slipperiest guy in the world. Like you just got so many things going on. Also, I have to ask you, your like system for time, I just don't understand it, because you messaged me yesterday being like, let's do around noon your time. I was like, cool. I live in Eastern. Then you posted.
I said 2. I said 2 your time.
No, you said noon my time.
The Lord's time.
By the way, it's not 2 my time. It's 1 my time.
Oh no, that's for our team meeting. For the team meeting, I said noon.
You messaged me about this. You said noon my time. I was like, cool, that works. Then you posted on Twitter noon Montana time. But then you just came on noon my time.
Okay, facts. You're right. I did screw this up. Okay, I admit that.
So I always block out 4 potential hours whenever we have to meet, because it could be quite a wide range.
Just embrace the Lord's time, okay? It does not happen on your time. Okay?
I'm trying, but you flipped it. When I think I understand you, you just flip it. But here's the thing: anytime you want to come on the podcast, 100%. You just randomly just tell us any day. Like me and Adam are pretty flexible. We'll come chat.
Okay. Okay. Deal. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I like your podcast. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, we have fun. My time to catch up with Adam on whatever his vegan progress has been for the week.
How many beans does he eat per week? Go.
Sometimes it's hard. Does he eat beans? I feel like he's not just a vegan. He's like a specific kind of vegan, which is like even more narrow.
Oh, okay, he's like the pescatarian of vegans.
Yeah,
So it's like
exactly.
he
He's
even
like,
like
I'm a
reduces
raw vegan. I don't cook my food.
I used to work with the person that would only eat like monolith meals. So it's just like he'd come to work with like 3 pounds of blueberries. And like that's his lunch was just a big ass handful of blueberries. Or it would be like just mangoes. He'd eat like 18 mangoes.
That is like, I feel like a good diet, dude. That's a lot of sugar.
That's what I said.
Was it like that was like his personal preference, or was it like a health thing? Like,
Yeah,
you know what?
apparently it was a health thing to eat just like these mono meals. I'm not saying whether it's healthy or not. I'm not even making a judgment as to the health. I've just never seen anything like that before, right? Because I came from Montana, which I didn't even know vegans were actually real. I thought it was like a joke the internet makes. And then like now I'm meeting vegans for the first time. And then like now I'm even vegans who look at other vegans like down, like, oh, look at those practically meat eaters over there. And it's just like crazy.
I had a friend growing up that basically only ever ate brown or red food, like foods in that hue, which just meant he just ate a lot of meat and nothing else.
I was about to say, does that mean he eats medium rare steak constantly?
Yes, nothing else. Just hated vegetables.
So was he actually like, was it ketosis? Was he a keto guy?
I think he was accidentally in ketosis for most of his life. Yeah, just not on purpose, but by accident. It worked out for him. I think he's like been in good shape, good health.
Okay, yeah, I get it. I have a friend who almost died in a climbing accident, and the result of his almost dying in a climbing accident is he's required to be in ketosis at all times.
Oh, interesting. He had a brain injury?
Yeah, like Matt almost died, brain injury, all that.
That makes sense,
He can't look at his phone for more than just like a few minutes a day, and it has to be on black and white. All these kind of things. I've seen him have a couple mini strokes, just like talking, and then like unable to start talking, and he has to like sit down and all that. And if he has to maintain like a very strict meat only diet.
Yeah. I've seen that helps a lot with. I think that's how it was originally discovered. It was like for seizure control or something.
Yeah, seizure control. That's wild.
We have a friend of a friend who died by doing keto and got revived by paramedics because somehow he let his like electrolyte balance get so low that he just literally died. He was like medically dead off of doing keto. So I know you were thinking about doing keto. I don't know if you started already. So just be careful. Drink water and like salt and stuff.
Don't worry, I like salt and those things. I'm a big fan of sodium.
Mm-hmm. It's great.
Big fan of potassium. You know. Don't laugh, right, bro. What the F? Okay, it's like kind of funny to do like a health food diet and then then literally die and get revived because you only ate meat. Like it's a little funny. Man, electrolytes. It's what plants crave. All right, this has been ridiculous. This ending is even more ridiculous. This is going on YouTube. I hope you know that this story will go on YouTube.
Wonderful. Okay.
All right, Dax. I will also put all of your links, your Twitch link, your THDRX.
No, DXR.
DXR. Gosh, it's impossible. Maybe
I'll change it just because you remember it the other way.
The worst part is that I remember it the other way. So now when I remember it, I go, it's the opposite. And then I now am like forever into this like incorrect memory.
You're in that trap. No, you're never going to get it. You're fucked.
Dude, I'll never get it. All right. Take care.
All right, see ya.